My name is Sydney. I am a member of the Conversation Coalition, and we are super excited to have you guys here, and we are very excited to also be here. We're appreciative of Lipscomb for hosting us this month. So basically, for anybody who's never been to a Conversation Coalition event before, our whole thing, our whole brand is that half the group is atheists and half the group is Christians. And each month, at the last Thursday of every month, except December, we do not have a December event this year, we get together and we have those conversations. We have discussions over topics like the existence of God, things that involve belief systems, atheistic opinions, and we have the conversations that you're told you're not supposed to have. We feel that by being taboo, what they're actually doing is these conversations are being held away from people where very important discussions could be had. And so our mission is basically just to prove that you can be friends, you can have a very civil discussion, you can have a quote unquote debate that doesn't involve any kind of anger or hostility of any kind. So we're just a group of friends who really like to talk in front of you guys and bring out the questions that would start a fight over Thanksgiving. So luckily we all seem to have made it past that point. So I would just like to introduce our speakers. We have Pedro and we have Elliot. Pedro, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Pedro Garcia. I always make the same joke, but I hope you enjoy my Nashvilleian accent today. And yeah, I'm just a team member with the Conversation Coalition. It's just always such a pleasure to have these conversations and delve into the big questions in life with people like Elliot and Sydney and all of you that, we care about truth and we meet together to actually try to search it. So I just love this. So thank you so much for being here. And John, by the way, it's a beautiful space. And thank you, Lipscomb, for allowing us to be here today.
So I'm Elliot. I just really enjoy having these conversations, as do all of us in the Conversation Coalition. So we started this back in July, and the specific goal, like Sydney kind of mentioned at the beginning, we want to have those conversations that are seemingly more and more difficult to have these days. One reason I think is because they're often online and we don't have that face-to-face interaction. So one of the biggest things we really try to do here is we try to model what a good conversation with lots of disagreement is like. We know we already disagree because we hang out and we just have these conversations over tacos and burgers and stuff. So seriously, if y'all weren't here, we'd be doing this somewhere. But we are thrilled that you are here because we really think there's a need for this. We think more and more people do actually want to have these types of difficult conversations in a friendly manner.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you all so much. And get ready because the end part is really the coolest in my opinion. Yeah. That's where y'all ask questions. So think of really, really hard questions. Pedro always says, and I love this line, you're going to think of a question that you shouldn't ask. Ask that question. That is what we want. That is what we want. We want to be challenged. So thank you so much.
And a quick plug, the snacks and refreshments in the back are free. There's a QR code if you feel inclined to donate. That is not expected whatsoever. And we also have a sign-up sheet. I am personally the person who emails every month. And if you want clips from past videos and past questions and discussions that we've held, we include those in our email list as well as updates, events, things like that. So if you're interested, religious or not, in between, wherever you fall on the spectrum, we would love to get your email on that list so that I can include you when I copy and paste every month manually everybody's email addresses. Great. All right, sweet. So this month's topic is, what does science say about reality? And now that is a gigantic conversation. That is a gigantic topic. So we have done our best to break it down into points and categories that I'm going to give to my participants in the form of true or false questions. So I am going to make a statement, true or false. They are going to decide whether they believe that it is true, if it's false, and why. And even if they agree, perhaps, maybe both of them say, well, that's true. I'm curious to see if the reasoning or the way that they got there is different. Maybe their thought processes for why they got to their answer is different. Just to give you a little heads up. All right, so let's just get started. So this question is for both of you, but answer-wise, Pedro, you can start. The existence of matter is also a sign of God's existence. True or false?
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess yes. Ultimately, yes. I would say yeah. That's true. Should I expand on this, or should we hear Elliot? Elliot, why don't you say what you think?
I would take the opposite side for sure. I would say false. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're coming out swinging. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Do you have an example or an expansion on that?
Yes. So, I mean, as a Christian, of course, one interesting thing about Elliot and I is that both agree that the scientific method is a good thing. And we agree with the scientific consensus as it is today. In that respect, he and I agree. The thing that is different in the way we approach this topic is that the fact that there's something as the scientific method exists, that implies something. That's when we part ways. For me, the scientific method implies the existence. I know it sounds obvious, but for me it is not. So it implies the existence of something, which is the universe. It implies that it's intelligible, that it can be understood, that our brain is there, that our brain can understand the universe. And ultimately, as a sustainer, that we can go through that when we talk about more things. I think as a sustainer of everything that is created, I think God is the best explanation possible. So that's what I think.
And just for anybody who's here who may not remember what the scientific method is, do you mind refreshing our memories?
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, so I guess it's worth at least pointing out I'm not a scientist.
Oh.
Yeah, not a PhD in anything. But in general, so let me take this approach with it if I can. So when we figured out what this topic was going to be, I both do and don't like the question, what does science tell us about reality? And I think that's a good topic for a discussion because it gives us an avenue to explain why I like it for some reasons and why I don't like it for others. One reason that I like it is because it allows us to expand on what we mean when we say science. And I think the vast majority of us, you know, when we actually talk about what science is and what science has done for humanity, we're not simply talking about test tubes. We're not simply talking about a laboratory and peer-reviewed double-blind studies. Absolutely, those are a massively important part of it. But we're also talking about the underlying important aspects of what makes science so good at giving us answers, right? So this idea of going out and observing a phenomenon in the world and asking ourselves, why does this happen? How does this happen? What's the mechanism? Going through the process of cutting out all of that subjectivity, all of that bias, right? So is science a baby grabbing a set of keys they've seen their mother hold 1,000 times and trying to put it at the door? Well, absolutely it is. Because that child has a thought in their head. They've observed that the door opens whenever this little object goes up here, right? So they test it, okay? So when we're talking about science today, specifically from my side, I'm always thinking about it in that broad sense. And I think that's worthwhile for us because we do science all the time. Every single one of you did science right here, right now, when you sat down on these chairs. You have no reason to believe, philosophically speaking, logically speaking, you have no reason to believe these chairs will support you. But, you know, you kind of do. But it's based on evidence of the past of you testing stuff out and so forth. So does that yes. Kind of get at what we're sweet.
So correct me if I'm wrong, both of you. What you're saying, Pedro, is like the vast greatness, the ability to exist shows you that it had to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is God.
Yeah, well, yes. And Sydney, just forgive me because I sometimes get so like specific. Like when we putting my Christianity aside, like I wouldn't say like it had to come from God. Now, the thing is that when you see everything that it is, as far as we can understand it, because I am not a scientist either, because it seems now with the quantum realm, it seems that all of us, it's just emergence. We're not even the most fundamental.
We don't have enough time to talk about anything quantum. We can't even use that word here. It'll take us an hour.
Both of these gentlemen told me they were scientists. So I don't know what we're doing.
So the thing is that what is it that we are seeing and what is it that it implies? So I'm not going to argue that, this is a scientific gap. There is where God is
so
found.
Without absolutes. You're not saying it has to. You're saying it implies the existence.
I would say, as a Christian, from a theological perspective and what Jesus has done in my life, I would say it is God. Now, it's a cumulative case for me. Now, from using just the empirical method, hypotheses, just testing and all of that, when we do that, we see that there are things that are quite impressive, which is, wow, we have developed. Why did natural selection got to a point where creatures like us have the capacity to have abstract thoughts, to go beyond the present time, to think about the future, the past, and to understand everything that has been created, which is actually to the point to understand something that is conceptual, but it applies really well to reality, which is mathematics. So when I see everything, I, as human beings, we see everything that is happening, I really see a lot of purpose. And we can get to this, but I think our mind is actually, I would venture to say that at this point in my life, that is actual evidence of the existence of God. And that I'm going to be daring and brave to say that. And we can talk about that.
And then, Elliot, you were saying we might spend the rest of our lives figuring out exactly what it is, but you have not seen enough evidence to suggest that it's God.
Yeah, I think, saying that everything that we see right now implies, this creator or divine essence and so forth. And I won't tangent too far on this, but I have a problem when we use those terms. I have a problem when somebody says divine essence. I have a problem when somebody says supernatural spirituality, deity, because not a single one of you will ever agree. And we all seemingly are using the same thing to give us what our answer is, right? There may be one or two things that we agree on when we talk about what it means to be transcendent. But at the same time, there's a lot about it that is fundamentally opposed. But with that being said, I think everything that we see around us is very much couched in the most likely apocryphal story of Laplace and Napoleon. So if you haven't heard it, it's real fun. Laplace, this real smart, sciencey, whatever. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. No, he had just recently written a book on astronomy, and somebody had given it to Napoleon at the time. A very patient man, a man known for being very kind to people, obviously. Somebody that you could, make angry and no big deal. So Laplace obviously was really daring when he gave him this book, and Napoleon asked, why isn't God in this book, basically? I see you talking about all these planets moving around and so forth, and you never seem to mention the creator. And Laplace basically responds with, we don't have a need for that hypothesis. The photosynthesis works without any implication of anything else. When water evaporates on the surface of a puddle and it turns into water vapor and it makes clouds and it rains in the town over, there's nothing transcendent or divine. It's very natural. It's very much a part of this world. And for me, saying that there is an implication of this category of existence, that A is not well defined to begin with, and then B, once we get a definition, it feels like we're contradicting. It's a jump. It's a big jump for me.
But I can see that. That for me, and I'll be super honest. I'll just start by saying, just coming to the conclusion that there could be hypothesized to the possibility of there being an intelligence, let's say, beyond what we are seeing, I think it's critical thinking at its finest. And I'll explain to you why. And I'm not, by the way, this conversation, I mean, we could, if you guys want to, we could define and God and talk about that, but we're not here.
That'll take too much time.
And pay attention to it's important to mention that all these terms like divine essence and all that, the only thing that I said is that I implied, or I said, there is a creator. And the reason is not because this conversation with Laplace and Napoleon, this understanding of the world being a mechanistic world where everything could be understood, Isaac Newton started with that. It developed enlightenment and all of this. But now what's happening, Elliot, this is the way I see it, is that the more that we do science, I would say, when the scientific method started, it didn't start it started perhaps by necessity, but it becomes also a part of for the whole purpose of discovery. And when you want to discover something, you are implying automatically, or you're projecting the possibility that that thing can be understood. And as far as we know right now in the known universe, and the universe is huge. I mean, it's incredibly big. The only thing that can understand the universe, it's actually a mind. And when we actually discover things, we know that can be understood because they're made out of patterns. Usually, I would say, something that is fundamental in science is mathematics, and you find it everywhere. So this is why I think this is critical thinking at its finest, is because if everything that you're discovering can be discovered because there's a pattern through which you can understand it, and you are the only known thing in the known universe that can understand it, it is not a big jump for me. I'm not talking about Jesus Christ at this moment. I'm only saying that if there's intelligence everywhere, and this is what I think, it's fair to say that we're finding things that can be understood. This implies heavily that I'm not saying like you can prove this empirically. Sure. The scientific method doesn't say anything about atheism either. We discover something, we're human beings, what's the meaning of this? That's when the conversation begins. I think just implying that there's a mind, that something created this, I think it's just not far-fetched at all. Now, when you bring into this conversation doctrine or Christianity or Islam and all of that, I understand that it could be more difficult. Well, we're not talking about that today, but that's my point about
the basic step of whether or not a deity of any kind is.
Yeah, I mean, the implication that this could have been created, I think it's really critical thinking at its finest. I could be wrong, of course. But me thinking that, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I think, I won't focus on this, but I'll push back. Well, I'll push back on the part where you said us going out to discover something kind of projects that it can be discovered. I think we've shown pretty regularly throughout the history of scientific discoveries that is not the case. Us going out to discover something, I think, is more hoping than it is the assurance that it can be understood, right? But that being,
would you go out if you know that you cannot understand?
Well, so no, most likely no. But I actually think that's a problem for the religious. But I don't know that we have time to get into that. I think the issue is in the religious mindset. Just back to the conversation quick about those terms that are ill-defined. The problem is that you are fundamentally restricted from ever understanding that category of existence. Well, you cannot know the mind of God. And so you are actually the one that is prevented from ever being able to discover. Whereas my view on things is it could be or could not be discovered. We don't necessarily know yet. But again, that is kind of a tangent.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Please. Yeah, I'll go back to
Sydney, you tell us.
Yeah, jump in at any
1
time.
minute.
Okay.
So, Elliot, as an atheist, I don't know if this is even possible. It makes sense logically because in terms of definitions, an atheist doesn't believe in it. with the information that we have collected about the universe and the facts that everything can be understood, everything that we discover can be understood through an actual process in language of mathematics. As an atheist, is there an opening in your in your critical thinking that is actually open to the possibility that there is some type of intelligence behind it?
Sure.
Putting behind, okay.
Yeah. There's a massive problem though. So like, yeah, the idea that I am closed off to one day waking up, let's just be kind of silly with it, but we wake up tomorrow and every reputable news source everywhere, every major journalist everywhere says, guys, we did it. We did it. It's real. God. And it's this one. Like, absolutely not closed off to that potential one day. But the issue is that it always seems to me that whenever we get to that point in the conversation, we have already accepted so many things that we have utilized correctly to continue down this path and further our understanding that completely 100% contradict that conclusion.
What is it that what is it that
so
the contradiction?
Good. This is a good transition back into, and I swear we'll stop after this. Sydney. I know it's rough. We may not be professional scientists. We are professional talkers.
Yeah.
They told me they were
I'm curious about this contradiction.
So the issue goes back to what you have said repeatedly about the ability for something to be understood, right? So the existence of a pattern is not evidence of a mind. A codification of that pattern and a purposeful continuation of that pattern could be evidence for a mind. The problem is we're all in the same philosophical boat of not being able to prove anybody exists but ourselves. We have to accept that and move on in the conversation. Otherwise, the conversation never happens. So we have to start from the beginning with the acceptance that at least something can be understood. Because if we don't, the conversation is impossible. It is logically impossible. It fails right from the get-go.
Okay.
And the issue is that if we accept those things, we don't have a great answer for the laws of logic. Don't have a great answer for solipsism. Don't have a great answer for just existence at all. But if we accept those things and move on, we don't get to 14 steps down the road, say, oh yeah, but we don't have good answers for those things. Because we've already been able to make so much progress in between that initial acceptance.
It is interesting. I promise you. It is interesting that you're saying this because, and correct me if I'm wrong, like we need to accept that this is the way it is because if not, then we couldn't have a conversation or we couldn't discover. I understand that, Elliot, but this universe happens to be the way it is. And when I accept that the universe can be understood through the language of mathematics, I can accept this. Yeah, I accept this. But of course, as a human being, we all ask these questions. It's very easy. Why? Some people say, well, this question is stupid. You can say that. You can say whatever. But that question is not stupid. And the actual facts that the universe is intelligible and that we can understand it, it happens to be the same creature that has a mind, tells me that by implication, I'm not contradicting anything by implying that there could be an intelligence behind it. I don't see any contradiction. By the way, I want to be soft in this, but I don't know how to say it, but I kind of lost a little bit of respect with people that, respect in this sense, not as a person, but like people that say like why questions are not necessary.
Well, so that's
where it's just very interesting.
That's where I think we're not exactly eye to eye on that. So I don't think that why questions are necessarily not worthwhile. My issue is never with the questions. I love skepticism. The problem...
You do?
I know, surprising, right? Surprising. No, but I'm a big fan of asking difficult questions. What I'm not a big fan of is coming to a conclusion without good justification.
Well, in terms of the scientific method, Elliot, you cannot come to the conclusion that either God exists or not. I'm talking about by implication.
I think you can if you have particular definitions of these things. If you have a definition of a God that does interact, as the Bible says, when more than one true believer is together and asks of me, it will happen. If that's your God, just raise your hand if you're a true believer, because we'll either find out that God's not true or you're not a true believer.
Yeah, but you want to apply the scientific method to a relationship. So I think you're equivocating a little bit.
I think we can apply a scientific method to a relationship.
I don't think so.
In certain categories we can. So for instance, we can say, hey, me and Sarah, we're in a relationship, and somebody goes, yeah, I don't know if I believe you. I've never seen you with this person. I don't even know.
She goes to a different school.
She goes to a different school. It's not Lipscomb. It's Belmont. Chill out. She's never been around. I don't see any evidence of this or anything. But hey, actually, look at this. You've got a Facebook profile, and you guys have a bunch of pictures on there, or so and so knows her and is her best friend or something. So these things are all in that broader category of science, right? We have an observation, we have a hypothesis, we strip out the bias and stuff. Can we currently do this thing where, I don't know, we hook you and I up to a bunch of wires and then go, all right, Elliot, tell me how you really feel about Pedro. And I go, well, I mean,
he has a lot of hair.
Yeah. I think he's a good guy. You hate him. No, we can't do that, right? But that's where the implications come in that are worthwhile, in my opinion, because we have evidence of all the things in that system, right? So just like with photosynthesis, we have evidence of the sun. We have evidence of plants. We know some plants die. We know some plants grow. We can put plants under certain lights and they grow better than the others.
But you keep, and it's okay that you do that. You keep going to the system. There's a system that does this and does this and does this. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about why the system is the way it is and what that implies.
Right. But to ask that question, you have to accept the system.
Of course, and I do.
But if you accept the system, then asking that question doesn't get us to the conclusion that you say it does.
Well, but the conclusion that I'm getting, it's not a conclusion that is empirical. It's not because right. I'm not using moving
on.
Yeah. Actually, you know what?
Cut us off. Good call. Thank you.
First, though, I have to disagree with both of you on something that you said. Usually moderators don't do this, but I have to say something. You both said that it is easy to imply that somebody would not embark on a journey knowing that there's nothing to discover. Have you been on Bumble lately? There's a lot of people on dating apps, and I'm just saying I disagree. Moving on to the next question. So this kind of leads a little bit into the conversation that we were having a moment ago, but the existence of human consciousness is also a sign of God's existence, and even that we were made in God's image. Is this true? Is this false?
No, definitely false. Oh, yeah, right. No, consciousness is very interesting, don't get me wrong. It's fascinating. We don't know a lot about it. We're learning new stuff all the time. But consciousness seems to very much be a byproduct of a sufficiently advanced sensory organ. That just seems to be the case. That system has become known as our nervous system today. We often like to look at the brain and talk about how cool that is and important that is. The issue is that we've recently started discovering how much the spinal cord may actually affect us, how much the microbiome in our gut may actually be doing a lot more when it comes to our cognitive faculties. It seems very obvious to me that what we experience as people would be the end result of a continuing advancement in complexity and sophistication of that sensory organ. It just seems really easy to follow the process, in my opinion. So let's not have the conversation about abiogenesis. That's a very difficult conversation. How do we go from abiotic material to biotic material? Not an answer there yet. That's fine. Let's put that aside. Let's accept that we do have life because we see it around us. Okay? To live, you must have homeostasis. To have homeostasis, and existence must have a definitive boundary between itself and the rest of the world. It is obvious from there, in my opinion, that a thing that can feel the difference between itself and not itself is going to be able to perpetuate itself much easier than something that cannot interact with the world around it. As that thing continues to advance those interactions become more and more specified and more nuanced, to the point at which an organism can develop essentially a time machine where we get to go, gosh, what would it be like if I just didn't show up to this event tonight? Well, Sydney would probably be more mad at me than when I just ramble for 5 minutes. Okay, so maybe I should go do that, right? What does liver and onions flavored ice cream taste like? Why don't we have to create this? It's because we have a sufficiently advanced and complex sensory organ that has just, for us, wired itself into something we know as the prefrontal cortex, a piece of our brain that literally, seemingly only purpose is to just go, hey, what's going to happen next? That's deeply important for a living organism to continue its life, right?
And this is Elliot. I absolutely like you and love you so much, my friend. But I think this is just so sad. And you tell me, hey, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I don't even know if you're a naturalist. I don't even know. Well,
depends on the definition.
The whole implication of everything that you just said is, hey, look, since we can explain it, it's just not as special.
Oh, I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's the exact opposite.
Okay.
I think it's only because of that it is special.
Okay, because it's just, it seriously, look, even if consciousness ends up being a byproduct of neural paths in, brain doing what it does, I don't think that explaining something at the scientific level would actually undermine how incredible it is that, actually you and I agree on this, that an blind and unguided process from a perspective, that's not my perspective, but would actually have an end product like that happens to be the case. That this consciousness that does this and does this, the way you explain it, it's like, okay, whoa, wait a second, because with this consciousness, we are aware of our own existence. I'm no one to say this, but I'm going to say it, meaning I think our mind is more special than a galaxy. I mean,
the human mind is incredible.
Okay, so
don't disagree.
But so not only this, now it happens to be the case. Now we have a mind, and with this mind, we can actually discern patterns that are conceptual, with which we can understand our surroundings. Now, I'm not saying with this, consciousness, God exists. It's not like I'm saying evidence. It's just there. I'm seeing the whole picture and where it is taking us. And I go, wow, like it's just, for me, the existence of God is a cumulative case. And I've talked to you before about this. The main reason, and by the way, there is evidence for God's existence only by the fact that I can tell you what happened to me since I became a follower of Jesus in 10 years. I'm here, I can talk to you about what happened. So I would say that that is evidence. In terms of science, you and I cannot say this, therefore God, or you cannot say this, therefore there's no God. Like science doesn't say anything. It's actually what it implies when we start asking questions that science has nothing to say about. I don't want to be very dramatic. It doesn't have to say much, I would say, like meaning, purpose. That is just parts of who we are as human beings. When we ask those questions and you take into consideration everything that is going on, wow, like, wow.
So, Elliot.
Real quick, I'm so sorry, real quick. Just because I think this is important. If we accept that the squishy substance we know as brain gives us this fascinating thing that we call mind, there may be mind-body dualism thing, I don't know, it could, hey, but put all that aside. If we accept that this brain is built on those patterns that we're discovering and able to interpret, it's not particularly surprising that would be the case. The brain is only existing because it follows the patterns that we then can go out and go, oh yeah, 1 + 1 = 2. The brain follows logic. It follows those patterns just the same. And so, of course, it still follows that system later on once it's become sufficiently advanced.
Yeah, but here's the question. And I like that. I really do. But here's the question. And I think it's a fair question. Some of you might think this question is stupid. It's okay. Existence could have been, I don't know, in a number of infinite ways. Yep. It happens to be the way it is. Yep. And what we're discovering, and with this I'm implying that we're not creating anything. We're discovering something that is there. And it all ends up being patterns that can be understood by minds, and we can actually predict things that are going to happen in the future with this language. And as we go back to not galaxies or the universe or how it is expanding and getting faster and all that, it's also when we go to the quantum level, we see also, we don't see order, but we're starting to see, I'm not using this as evidence, God exists, but things like this thing about the observant in certain subatomic particles that you're actually observing, and they're behaving in a certain way. When you stop looking at them, they start behaving in a different way. Like, it seems like the mind seems to be our mind seems to be such a basic principle of reality. The more that we do this, I don't think that it is far-fetched at all to imply the existence of intelligence.
To understand, Elliot is saying these are patterns that have established themselves well over time, and isn't that amazing? Everything has accumulated in a way that these patterns exist that has developed basically into the human consciousness, and to you that is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And Pedro is saying he agrees. The mind is such an amazing amalgamation of patterns that it can't possibly be random. It can't possibly just have poofed into existence.
Yeah. I think that's I definitely would. I would push back a little and say that I do think that the existence of the patterns and things are phenomenal. It's all incredible.
Right.
It isn't something that is outside of this step-by-step process, right? Like, it's not going to blow your mind, hopefully, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, did you know that when baking a cake, you gotta have the ingredients before you can, like, start mixing them? You're going to be like, well, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And so the existence of the patterns is the having the ingredients. I don't get to the cake that is consciousness unless I have the ingredients to begin with. So when we get all the way around to the made cake and somebody goes, man, isn't it crazy? We just happen to have flour, sugar, eggs, butter. Like, no, it's not, because I made a cake.
But how is that analogy, Elliot? How is that analogy? Seriously. I like the analogy. I know what you're trying to say, but when that analogy breaks down so fast, what we're talking about existence itself.
It doesn't, though, if you're actually using the correct dichotomy. You're not using the correct dichotomy. What you're saying is this existence versus other existences. That is a false dichotomy.
What is it that I'm saying that I don't think I'm saying?
So what you're comparing and what you're interested in comparing and contrasting is this existence that has a probability of 1, we are freaking here, this one versus the infinite options. That is not the question. The question is, what is the fundamental criteria between the real dichotomy of existence and non-existence? Non-existence does not follow the pattern. Non-existence is philosophically and logically impossible.
Well, I'm
so
not implying
if we start from the position of existence, then these things inherently come with it. It has to be ordered. There has to be a pattern. That pattern, most likely, the inviolable laws of logic. Are we 100% sure? No, but we're not 100% sure about anything. But again, by the time that we have already accepted all of those things, and we have made it to the point that our radiometric dating is incredible, that we have gotten to the point that we are smashing tiny particles together, going as close to the initial Big Bang expansion. We've already moved so far past these questions. You do not then get to negate everything that we've done in between and say, now we have to go back to these questions. Because we've already all seemingly moved on. We aren't actually asking the question about the patterns when it comes to filling up our cars with gas, when it comes to waking up in the morning, when it comes to predicting a solar eclipse. We're not asking the question about, my gosh, isn't it crazy that all of this math works? No, it's not crazy because we're in a physics class.
It is just, wow, like it's just, I'm sure that you hear Christians saying stuff and you go, wow, man, that is exactly the feeling I'm getting. It's just such a way to look at the universe, so dry, so like, oh, we have these laws of logic.
And that's where I think
it
the
is
exact
just,
opposite
wow,
is, because I used to
I
used to exist in a space where the answer to everything was God.
Yeah.
I think it is problematic oftentimes when believers want to bring in anything other than the answer that God is actually just more capable.
Now, if you say that the answer cannot be God, I don't know if you're saying that, but if you, okay.
Not necessarily, until we define what those the properties of that God is.
Because you cannot say this cannot be, God cannot exist, and then call yourself I'm not talking about you in general, call yourself a free thinker. If you're free, you wouldn't be restrained yourself because of having
Sure, I mean, you have your mind open enough, but not so open that your brain falls out, right? Yeah. I didn't come up with that quote, so don't attribute it. But
Sydney,
go ahead. Yeah, please.
Am I allowed to interject my own opinion at all?
Yeah, go for it.
Just to make you feel better, because you look distraught.
No, I'm just, this topic is one of my favorite topics.
You look distraught.
I love it, and when I hear this, Elliot talking about this, it's just
and
so...
all I want to say is I have never found more beauty and amazement and value and joy and love and light than since being an atheist.
I would, and that's why
I just want to make you feel better about that. We don't view it like a dry.
When you say it,
I'm not talking about experience, personal life.
No. But
guys,
just that
be
view.
careful with the analogies of bringing, because we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
We're not talking about experience, because if you talk about experience, then no.
But that understanding of the universe, that understanding of existence, to me, is the most fascinating explanation I've ever had yet. That is the most... Do you know how many species of shark bioluminesce? If you don't, just look it up, because it's not zero. There are multiple species of shark, I think it's a dozen, that get like 3+ feet long, who have the ability to make chemicals in their body that make them glow in the dark like a lightning
But what
bug.
does that say about anything?
What that says
Tell me,
is,
please.
especially when we take out this hypothesis, as Laplace did, when we take out this hypothesis of the divine that can just do whatever, whenever, it makes that so much more valuable.
Yeah,
It makes that so much more interesting.
Yeah, I don't
because it doesn't come from a specific, oh my gosh, let me just make 12 different species of shark that glow in the dark. Because then it's like, well, yeah, but why didn't you make 12 species of shark that glow in the dark and can sing? Because you can do that. The world is less interesting when you have that possibility in your back pocket,
But
that you can just always
that
play.
is worldview. This is not a scientific statement. This is not empiricism. This
No,
is
no,
just
no. Yeah,
because-
this is just my opinion on stuff.
Correct. Because that I mean, okay.
feel
So
like-
Elliot, I like what you said. Okay, so you guys, I like. But seriously, what we're talking about, that doesn't say anything about the conversation. Like you can make these examples and the sharks and all of this.
Well, you were the one that brought up that the particular understanding that I had laid out seemed to kind of not hit you in an emotional capacity. And I guess what my response to that was, because it felt to me as if you were saying like, okay, yeah, maybe so, but like that doesn't really hit home with me. And I don't see how it hits home with others.
Oh, yeah.
And my response is, this is how it hits home with me.
I see.
And this is why I think it should hit home to everybody.
It's
Like-
just as a summary, and perhaps it is not. I just see like, oh wow, we can explain things and things are there. This is incredible. Wow. But for me, that is just like, wow, level
It's
one.
not enough.
Let's talk level 2, level 3, level 4.
Well, so what
and
is-
those questions?
What
are-
is level 2 then? If we're on level
what
1,
we're talking
and that's-
about, which is okay. So we have. I'm going to repeat myself here. But,
Yeah, we both do.
Right. So we have the sharks. You would like to have sharks singing. That would be awesome. We have all this, the system. We have Earth. You have planets. You have the universe. You have some atomic particles. You have people. You have people with feelings. You have brains. You have mathematics. You have conceptual things that actually apply to reality. You have all this thing. And then you go, you discover, you explain it, you go, wow, this is cool. And then when you get all of this, as if it was a story, let's just put it that way. It doesn't have to be, and I'm not saying it is, but just to understand it. When you get all of that, you go, wow, what does that imply? As a human being, I ask these questions. You guys all do ask those questions too. What is this all about? Like, seriously, when we ask those questions, I don't think the marvel it stops with just looking at a shark and say, wow, this came from nothing this doesn't come from something that's definite. It just when it's open-ended, it actually brings more value. I think that is just worldview. That doesn't apply truly to what we're talking about when it comes to implication of what is. I don't know if but
No,
you,
I think I'm tracking, and in part,
1 minute.
okay, I'll be even shorter, hopefully. In part, I guess. Maybe it is just a personal thing, and that for me, being in a place of saying, this is as far as we can go thus far, we can see that there seems to be something out there, not sure, it's a little dark, kind of fuzzy shapes, could be more trees, could be a murderer, don't know, but this is as far as we've gotten. I'm very comfortable with that. And for some people, they're not comfortable with that. I don't have a problem with saying, gosh, what do you think it is, man? What do you think that fuzzy shape is in the distance? And I love doing that. That's why I love having these conversations. But where you and I have the biggest parting of ways is that we're both standing at the same spot. We agree we're standing at the same spot. We've got street lights all the way up to here, and then you say, up ahead is a car. And I say, I don't know. Could be a car, could be a tree, could be a puppy. And that's where the issue is. I don't have a problem with saying the continuation of this dark street implies that there's more on this street. Sure, the issue is not that. The issue is when we say we know what that is.
But
I
in,
know
in
it was
your
over a minute,
analogy,
I'm
in
sorry.
that you're saying that I would say that. By the way, I hope in your analogy I have your hair. By the way, I'm not bald.
Yeah,
In this imaginary
Fabio
situation,
looking. Yeah,
I
me
wouldn't.
too.
This is the thing. I wouldn't say, "Oh, there is a car."
But you do. You say there's an
No,
intelligence.
no. Wait. Well, yes. Well, okay.
That's
okay.
it. So
No,
you're,
wait.
you're
But give me a
saying there
second.
is.
Give me a second. I'm implying through the same scientific method what we know about things. Not me, like real scientists. I'm not a scientist. But in this analogy, I wouldn't say, "Oh, there's a car." That is not what I'm saying. In this case, I would actually look at you, at the street light, and I would look at this thing that seems to be a car, and I would say to you, "Wow, isn't it cool that we live in a place where there is order, so things that are ordered can exist?" That is exactly what I would say to you. I wouldn't say, "Wow, there's a car there." So in that analogy, I'm sorry.
Question.
That wasn't me. That was a multiverse
Question
version of me.
specifically for Pedro. And I'm asking this because I imagine, I have lots of friends who are here, I imagine they're asking the same question. So many times you have said you are not saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you are not saying for sure 100% there is a God. You are implying that that everything you have seen has led you to believe that yes, there is a God. That you have seen enough evidence that implies time and time again that there is a creator. So is that correct, first of all?
Yes, and
Okay.
yeah, please.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is because people who are not religious might wonder, is it worth all of the rules and the things that are expected of you should there be a God if you are not 100% sure that there is a God? If that makes sense. So, for example, the Bible, to boil it down, I mean this not disrespectfully, the Bible has a lot of rules in it. There are things that you do, and there are things that you are not supposed to do. And one might ask, if you're not saying for sure 100% there is a God, but you're instead saying everything I've seen has led me to believe that this is all evidence of God, are the expectations of people who call themselves Christians worth that micro percent that maybe that wasn't God?
So I like this question. So today's conversation, as I understood it, we are talking about within the parameters of the scientific method, and I talk about this with the utmost respect. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a philosopher. I am alive and I love these topics. That's how much I can give. So today, what I say is, thinking that there's intelligence besides sustaining the universe is by what we know through the scientific method in putting scripture aside. I'm not talking about that. It is, as an implication, as a hypothesis, it's critical thinking at its finest. This doesn't mean that it's true. Now, why do I believe in God? This helps. Oh my gosh, yes. Cumulative case intelligence. Oh, yes. But I don't believe in God because of that.
Right.
I believe in God because one day I said, okay, so what is wrong? We don't have to talk about this. I don't want to open a kind of worm. So the reason why I believe in God, you guys know, I'm a follower of Jesus. And this implies, if I put in a sheet of paper, it would be a huge one, everything that I've said, everything that I've thought about, everything that I've said, everything that I am, the things that I think about when I am alone and no one is looking, and I presented all of this to you, you would say, there's something wrong about you. You would say that. And I think, and I would venture to say, with the utmost respect, but this is parts of Christianity, the same happen if I would see what you would write on this sheet of paper. So I was introspective to the point that I said, wow, I do need a savior. And that is when the cross stands. And that is the main reason why I'm a Christian. Now, of course, if I were to live in a universe where there is no patterns, there's no order, or else, by the way, I want to be honest. I don't want to just, I deal with that when it comes to nature. There are difficult things for Christians. Nature is brutal. Nature is absolutely brutal. So it's not like for a Christian, it's not also beautiful. Like, oh yeah, everything's. But of course, you brought up the scripture about this. Scripture is beautiful. Ecclesiastes, Job, Psalms. It tells you constantly you don't know everything that there is to know about what God has done. So I also live with an open mind in the sense that there are always things that I'm going to discover about Him as I have a relationship with Him. But I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And you can make a comment.
Yeah,
it's
real
fair.
And
quick,
then
real quick.
after that, we'll hop to Q&A.
Yep. Again, with this focus on the basic order that seems to again be inviolable, right? This is for me again just where we have to start. If the idea of living in a world that doesn't have patterns, Pedro, explain to me in any way whatsoever without patterns what that is. Give me any criteria whatsoever. I challenge every single one of you. Take as much time as you need. I'll give you my direct contact. Call me when you get one. But the moment that you put a description on something that is completely chaotic, unordered, unpatterned, you have failed in your goal. You have put a pattern and an order to something that is unpatterned, which seems to mean the idea of existing in a space that doesn't have all of that at the ground level just can't be possible. From that, I think I lost what the other one was that I was going to say, but
Perfect time for Q&A.
Yeah, honestly, it is. I think there's. Oh nope, I remembered it. I'll be real quick. I swear. So, you say it's a cumulative case, and you say that there are all of these different pieces that we've discovered, in science as a whole, that lead you to this place. And I hear this a lot from many people of many different faiths. And the problem is that just as we have started to see the likes of very well-known Muslim apologists stop using scientific miracles in the Quran as an argument, we have seen the same thing happen with Christian apologists, with Hindu apologists, with Jewish apologists. Everybody is stepping back from that because when you open the door to that in your religious understanding, we now have to go piece by piece. And if we go piece by piece and none of them are sufficient to get to that conclusion, you don't get to add up a bunch of broken arguments and failed papers. That's not how it works. They don't count for you. You now just no longer have the science. And I think what you said is the best argument for belief in God. I think what you say is at the core of your belief is actually the best answer. I just have problems with that answer still. I think it's the best, but I still have problems. But I love doing this with you.
Oh,
Seriously.
same here, my friend.
I love this.
Same
we have
here.
So much fun.
Round of applause for these guys. They're awesome. All right. Questions. And you can have questions for a direct speaker, for both of them. Totally up to you. What questions do we have?
Get spicy, you guys.
I
Come
know
on.
we got them.
We got like 30 minutes here, so you don't want us to just keep rambling. I promise.
Question.
Okay. You
What is your name?
Rena.
Reina.
You had said that the reason why you believe in God is because you need a savior. A savior. You need it. You need a savior from what?
For myself.
For yourself.
Yes.
Just for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what makes you believe in God, because you need a savior from your own experience in life.
Well, would you mind? Sorry, I want to say your name well. Would you tell me again?
Rena, Gina, Tina.
Regina. So
Rena, not Regina,
So,
Rena.
Instead of asking me questions to lead me to a specific point, what would you share with me the point that you want to share?
You were explaining why you believe in God, and then your final answer is because I need a savior. Not because there's evidence, but because you need a savior. A savior from what?
Well, if
That was my question.
Okay, so yeah, I need a savior because I know what I'm carrying. I know who I am internally, and I'm actually walking evidence that God exists because of what happened in my life.
I can tell you what happened to me during the last 10 years. And I try to take seriously actually following Jesus. And then when it comes to evidence, when we talk to evidence within the framework of science, again, science doesn't give us any type of evidence for atheism or for Christianity in terms of like empirical method, mathematics. But by implication, I do believe that there is an intelligence that transcends the universe, matter, and actually that fits really well with my worldview, which entails that there is a creator that created everything. So for me, it fits beautifully.
Okay. Great question. Next question?
But thank you, Reina, for the
Yeah,
question
thank you,
so
Reina.
much.
I know we got him. I see him on your faces.
Yeah, normally we don't let the members of Conversation Coalition ask questions, but please, you guys, if nobody else is going to be brave enough to get spicy.
This is another one. This is for Pedro.
What's your name?
William.
William.
Um,
I've seen you before.
You have, yeah.
Hey, William.
Hey, nice to see you again. So I actually used to go to school here.
Oh, nice.
I did. That's my undergrad.
What did you study here?
Mechanical engineering and math.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
You get it. You're smart.
Would you mind asking the question to Elliot, please?
Whatever.
No, go ahead.
I can come up with one.
Go ahead, William. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you said that it's amazing that our world can be described with mathematics.
Yes.
Can you...
Probably not.
Yeah. Can you maybe stretch and kind of explore the idea of what would it look like if to have something that couldn't be explained or couldn't be described with the language of math? I mean, is there anything that couldn't be?
Do you know of anything that cannot be described?
I mean, I'm kind of asking you to
Currently, no.
think about it.
Okay. Something that cannot be described. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I listen to a lot of scientists, and many of them just imply and say that mathematics is the foundation to everything that they do. So by implication, my hypothesis, without having testable empirical data to back up what I'm about to say, it means that mathematics is just foundational to understand the universe. So when it comes to that, that's what I'm saying. As of now, perhaps that in 200 years, we'll develop some type of mathematical branch. That mathematics would branch out to something that is more, mathematics is even emergent, and we find that it's something that is more fundamental. As of now, I don't think that when it comes to thinking about an example that cannot be explained by mathematics, is that what you're asking me specifically?
Not explained by math, but or just described by math. I mean, is there anything you couldn't describe using the language of math?
I think he's asking, is there anything that exists that cannot be described by math currently?
You know, I'll be honest with you, William. I could say something, but since I lack knowledge to actually give you a good answer, I'm not. I prefer just to learn from you and from others. But I would say, though, that as far as I know, when it comes to mathematics, it seems to be foundational to discovering things. Now, I could say, if you and I are grabbing a cup of coffee or whatever, I would say, well, I don't know. Meaning, purpose, those things cannot be explained by mathematics. You can quantify many people that have meaning in life. You can count them. But when it comes to finding meaning, what it is and what things imply, I don't know that mathematics as it is today, for example, could explain things like that. Now, if those things are not important in our worldview, then that would be a problem because, for example, Lipscomb should close all departments of literature.
Don't say that. We want to come back.
No.
Don't
But
say
that seems to be important. I'm sorry, William, if I didn't give you a good answer about this.
I thought you did. I thought you did good, man. And I think I like a lot of what you just said there, and I think the difference is that when I look at things like abstract thoughts, I'm not separating those from the same system that I've been using to get me to the possibility of abstract thoughts. It feels to me like that those types of things sit in a different category for you of existence. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that even if you have a subset of existence, even if you have a more specified category of existence, that now we can differentiate between this type of existence and other types of existence, they are all under the category of existence at the beginning, which means they all follow the rules. They all follow the laws of logic. They all follow mathematics. It goes laws of logic, then math, then science. Everything comes from that. Everything comes from that when it comes to... She's not going to let me She's not going to let me respond to that.
See.
All right.
We had a question on the front row.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of your ability to engage in conversation authentically and honestly and passionately, but also you're smiling at each other and having a handshake and your friends. And I'm wondering, do you have personal boundaries or a standard you're holding yourself individually to throughout the conversation? And what's your advice for other people wanting to engage in this conversation? How did you guys find yourself in this position with the ability to do this?
Wow.
Fantastic.
Like, what's your name?
Eve.
Thank you, Eve. So I usually say to my daughter, this is something, she's 2 years old, when we see something that we like and we go, wow. And
ask
that
more
is
questions
such a
like
good
that.
Oh my, that is such a good question. Please, Elliot, go first.
I do. And it's not like I have exactly like a list of bullet points necessarily. But so I engage in these types of discussions. I have for many years now on a lot of different platforms, both in person as well as online. I take calls on the Atheist Experience. I review videos on Atheist Republic, all kinds of different things. My general goal and kind of the rules that I follow is about being empathetic and about truly being curious. And I think those two work really well with each other if you genuinely give a crap about the other person, right? I know that sounds kind of low level, but it is surprising how much of that doesn't exist, right? There is just a lot of people out there, unfortunately, who do not truly seem to care about what happens, right? Pedro and I, we disagree like crazy, but I genuinely want to know that he's okay tomorrow. It matters to me. And that, plus that honest curiosity, that experience that we have all thankfully had at least once in our life where we absolutely do not know what is on the other side of this door. And we are just desperately interested in opening that door and figuring it out. Whatever it is. If it's a new car, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Monty Hall. But if it's a goat, I'm also comfortable with that because right now all I have is a question mark. And I just want to try and get something in that box. Now, that can lead us to some places where we start to accept things without proper justification, which is why I focus so much on epistemology and skepticism and so forth. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, that true focus of, man, I really just want to know, whatever that means, I just want to learn more. Plus that, hey, this is a person, and I care about them as a person. Those two things, I think, will take you miles and miles, because that is stuff that's unfortunately, again, lacking. And I think you just make more progress. If you just want to be like super duper like cynical about it, and egotistical, hey man, you're actually going to accomplish your goals more often by behaving and engaging in this manner, I think. I think we've got a lot of evidence of that. I guess Pedro and I could have just come up here and yelled at each other and cussed at each other the whole time, but I don't feel like anybody would have learned a single thing. We wouldn't have made any progress for ourselves individually or collectively.
So, I mean, I don't have much to add to that, Eve, but would you mind asking that again? I want to... Oh, I see.
Keeps you
Yeah.
in a, in this position where you're able to be honest and passionate, but yet also go grab a coffee tomorrow and be on good terms.
So one
like
thing,
mentally, or
yes.
even what you allow yourself to say, or tone, whatever details.
Such a good question. Because actually, it underpins really well what we, the Conversation Coalition, why we exist. One thing that is so crucial to me, even though, this and that and arguments, whatever, when I come to these conversations, when I try to talk about these things, these are difficult topics. I'm not afraid to look silly. I really don't care. I've been silly. I've made so many mistakes in my life. I mean, this week, I've made a few. It's just non-stop. So for me, it's essential coming to this conversation saying, I'm going to look probably, for some people, actually, not only for some people, but logically inconsistent. I'm okay with that. That's why we need to talk about this thing. I would say, though, like with peer review articles and scientists, people that know when it comes to this topic of science, I think some of them look like that sometimes because they hypothesize something. Oh my gosh, I make a mistake here. So that is essential to me. And the other thing is, I was an atheist myself 10 years ago. Then became a Christian. And it blows my mind it blew my mind when I started just meeting more people. I was living in this country. How Christians and atheists, this is a very general, how sometimes they think about each other. And I go, my gosh, we have so many things in common. What are we doing here? So that is, I mean, I guess it's part of my story, but I just don't, And then the other thing I would say, Eve, in these conversations, we also want to say, hey, let's be nice and all that, of course, but we need to challenge each other. Because if I'm saying something that is completely silly, it doesn't make any sense, I actually want to know. So that's just...
Metal sharpening metal. Truly,
yes,
for the sake
Proverbs.
of just... Yeah. Checkmate atheist. Well, you got me there.
No, not at all. I'm not that way. I'm just saying, not at all. Checkmate. Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to add one other thing. I think that's helpful is when you truly believe something. And in my opinion, true belief is when you have been exposed to the opposing ideas, the opposing facts, the opposing evidence. You've looked at it, you've read it, you've heard it, you've talked about it. And at the end of the day, you still say, in my heart, this is what I believe. Then when you truly believe something, somebody else's words can't scare you. So I believe with my heart of hearts the things that I believe. I also believe Pedro 100% when he says he truly believes what he's saying. And so if you truly believe something, his words at the end of the day won't hurt me. My words won't hurt his. We'll disagree, but we both really believe what we're saying. And the only time you might get scared is if maybe you don't actually believe what it is you say you believe. And if you are scared by that, focus less on Pedro scaring you and more on why is it that you're scared? And then research, and then read, and then find what you truly believe. And I think that helps in having conversations.
I would like to add something to this. This is all beautiful, and I think it is. It's a good value. Now, the thing is, what would happen if all supermarkets in this area, in Nashville, would stop having food for 3 weeks? Then all of this would start being completely different.
I would eat Pedro.
And
No way.
but it's a good question. Would I, bring the spot so that I could be a hypocrite? Would I actually behave in that moment? What would you guys do in that moment? So it's almost like being not taking for granted what we have, but then also actually being consistent.
Yeah.
Which is maybe another day we'll talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
If we wouldn't have this ordered, we go to bed. It's amazing. We have a bed, we have a house, we have all these things. Those things were not there. We would have. Would we? How do you say that in English? Would we be having a conversation like this and these values? Would I give you this and food and all that? We would get to the center nucleus of what's happening with humanity, when there's no order, what do we do? So I'm just making this comment just to say, just to give you a small snippet of how my mind works. Like, oh my gosh, how can we be consistent? And of course, as a Christian, that would be a challenge. I don't have food. What do I do? I need to share with you. My daughter's about to die, but I want you to survive. So I'm just saying that I don't want to take for granted what we have, but also bring the challenge to you as atheists or whatever you are in the faith, non-faith spectrum, where you fall. It's like, wow, am I going to be consistent with this? If you're a secular humanist and the way you love people and empathetic, will you do that if society were different? Would I do that as a Christian too? So very interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, and I just wanted to end, just kind of wrap back up with that great question, and just say that I think one thing that all of us, a part of the Conversation Coalition, are really hoping for is that we spark in everybody this desire and this interest, right? Yes, we have the conversation here, this one event, but we don't want it to end here. We want you to go home and we want you to pick the brain of your best friend or your partner, or, you know, talk to your children and just say, what do you think is going on in the world, you know? You might actually be right, you know? We want to instill this in all of you, and we hope that we have been able to do that. I know here tonight there's a bunch of people that have come to a good bunch of these events in the past, and so we've got you guys at least on our side of critical thinking and cordial discussion. So we're taking over the world with an army that'll just stand around and talk about everything and question stuff.
And then we just see them fist fighting on the parking lot,
yeah.
just on no holds. So we had a question here with the gentleman in the blue shirt.
I've enjoyed this conversation, but it seems to me that we're in the middle instead of the beginning or the end. How would you guys feel? We believe in faith. Faith is not something you necessarily can see, but you can feel. It's like the wind. You don't know where it comes from, but you feel it, and you know it's there. And you see it in other people that have faith. Science obviously is good. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't be alive today because of COVID. Science developed the vaccine, so it saved a lot of people's lives. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's still, we're starting in the middle of the conversation. Why don't we go back to the beginning? Somebody said matter. Does matter prove that there is a God? Absolutely. Because there was nothing before matter, and something had to create that matter. And the odds of it, this Big Bang theory, the odds of that happening is 100 trillion to 1 that could actually happen. And for us, the result of it, for us to have conscious minds, for us to have a heart that actually loves and bleeds and cries and so on and so forth. So why don't we go back to the very beginning and say this, which is true, creation or evolution? Because that's the real question is.
Oh no, please, if you want to.
Well, that is interesting because that I don't think. I mean, I know that there's some Christians that see that like this dichotomy there. I just think that evolution and creation can coexist together. So I just don't see that there's any problem with both existing together. Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead.
So that's where, because I agree with Pedro. I can think of valid arguments to accept both an intelligent designer, a deity of some kind, a divine essence, and evolutionary theory. So I definitely don't believe those are mutually exclusive. But the issue I would want to push back on that you said about the beginning being nothing and then something, I think that's kind of the issue that I was trying to bring up earlier. So we can just swap nothing for non-existence. We can swap something for existence. The true dichotomy is between exist and not exist. Something and nothing, okay? If you define nothing, in any way, shape, or form, you have lost the game. You have already added some criteria or characteristic to a thing that is supposedly completely without criteria or characteristic. So, the reason I bring this up is to say, the start for me would not be this switch from nothing to something. Because I would say there's literally over a dozen infinite universe theories that have been postulated. Once, they were all shown on screen to William Lane Craig by Sean Carroll in a 2-hour debate. He just had a slide that had every single one of them listed that he knew of at the time. And so the idea that there was ever nothing may just be the stumbling block to get over that we then go, oh, hey, actually, this actually isn't that big of a deal. Because if we just say, hey, there never actually was nothing, then that confusion, that difficulty, that seeming butting of heads doesn't exist anymore.
But you understand why it is incredibly logical to see something and to believe that nothing is a possibility.
No.
Okay, so
No, I don't.
Well,
because it violates the very first law of identity.
yeah. So what you're saying is that since I cannot define it with my words,
No, because it fails logically. Because to define something with words means that we must have an understanding of one.
so nothing
we must
cannot
have
exist.
identity.
So nothing.
True philosophical nothingness
The absence of anything.
does not exist because the labeling of the absence of anything is a something that is applied to it.
Nothing, and I need to use the language because
Right.
it is what we
Right.
have. Nothing cannot be because language cannot describe it. Is that what you're saying? Because that is
Nothing cannot be because
Language
the moment because to be requires a fundamental adherence to certain
so.
things.
What if we actually were able to communicate telepathically?
It wouldn't change anything.
So it would be a concept. So nothing. It would be described by a concept, and nothing would be. Is that what you're saying?
Nothing still wouldn't exist because the definition of true nothingness would be something that cannot have a definition. Because if it has a definition, you have now at the very least put a circle around something. The moment you put the circle around the something, guess what you've got? You've got a something in the circle and the something circle.
So because you cannot define nothingness, nothing cannot exist. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Nothingness cannot exist.
Wow,
Right.
like that is
true
wow,
nothingness.
Elliot. That is just
because when we use the term nothing, what we're using is a colloquial term that is workable in our sense here, and it makes sense for us to use it. When I say, "Hey, what's in my hand?" It's nothing. To actually believe there is nothing in my hand right now is fundamentally silly, like you said. We know air exists. We know what air is made of. We're finding more and more about the complexity of subatomic particles. So we know that true nothingness is not right here. What we're saying is, well, you're not like holding anything currently in your hand. So then let's go to a concept. So if we go to the conceptual aspect, the problem is that you can't start to think about it without accepting the fundamental principles that allow you to think about it.
This is one thing about Elliot. When I'm listening to him, he takes me to places where my mind cannot go. And I love that about this, but I'm telling you, man, like this thing, we said we need to talk about this.
I know.
So
It's a dense topic.
restriction of language, definition, like because we don't have
It's
a way.
deeper than that, though. It's not just because it's not. Okay, so let me put it to you.
But succinctly, because it just
the issue is not the issue is not the fact that we can't put words to describe it. We can approximate what we're describing when we're talking about true philosophical nothing.
and I think
But
this
the
is
issue is that what true philosophical nothing is really trying to get at is a step beyond. When we say nothing, we're imagining a blank void. The problem is that what you have is a void. A void is a thing. If a void is a thing, it's not nothing.
I think this is. I get what you're saying. Oh yeah, and
Okay,
he does
okay.
as well. I'm just thinking that this way of thinking is just it comes more for the necessity from your worldview as an
I
atheist.
disagree.
Oh,
I think it just literally
100%.
it just violates identity.
I don't think so.
It violates the first law of
doesn't
logic.
violate anything because you're inside
It
of the
violates
system.
nothing. Nothing.
You're talking inside of the
All right.
system, of course. You weird things, but then we're talking about nothing when it comes conceptually, definitions, words, and all of this. Philosophically, I kind of get that. Well, let's wait to see. But I just this particular thing it blows my mind that
Maybe we figure out one
Wow.
day that
Like-
true philosophical nothing can be. But again, currently, to be, to exist, means that you adhere to, whatever this existence is, has to adhere to a specific set of criteria that is fundamentally not part of the criteria of not being.
But
That's what a dichotomy is.
But you know that nothing. When a scientist says nothing, usually he's not saying what a philosopher says when he says nothing. There's
we
a nothing.
are in this conversation.
No, I know. But I'm just saying that
I
when you
feel
say
like
nothing,
this is
we'll
the
stop.
2023
let's stop talking
version
about nothing.
of Who's on First featuring Abbott and
But
Costello.
that was a good question.
That was a great question, actually.
great.
We have one more in the back.
So I'm a student. I'm a student here.
Hey, great.
Hey, what's your
and
name, man?
I'm Antonius. Pleasure to meet you guys.
It's a beautiful name.
A book that we have to read going into the university as a prereq is called the Basics of Christian Belief, and the author talks about how the atheist in general doesn't really have anything to look forward to, just because they don't have a moral law that's being transcended to them by a higher being. So, what is your view on that? Like, do you think
Yeah, I love
that
that.
the atheist is pretty much like a nihilist in his point of view?
Is this for Elliot or for me?
It's for both of you.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
when you said that you were an atheist before you turned to the faith, was your lifestyle really like that? And do you think it's fair for a Christian apologetic to superimpose that idea onto an atheist?
Yeah, couple of things for sure. Like an atheist doesn't have anything to like look forward to. Kind of depends on what you mean by that, right? Like because there are a lot of non-believers in a deity or divine presence who do believe in an afterlife, right? So atheism really just is the answer to a very, very simple question. Like, do you believe in a God? If you don't, you're some type of atheist, right? Now, we can talk about how it's used in the philosophical literature versus colloquially versus politically versus yada, yada, yada. Agnostic versus non-theological, non-cognitive. We can do all that. But I don't think it's worth it, right? Because I think really what we're getting at the end of the day is that simple question. Do you or do you not believe, right? So from there, though, the issue is that one could argue, and I think there could be some valid arguments that are presented, where somebody says, if you hold that conclusion, it then leads to all these things. I definitely currently have not come across anything that is both valid and sound to say that simply because one does not believe in a God, one must believe there is no purpose in life, right? And nihilism gets a bad rap a lot of times, I think, for a lot of different reasons. There were some particularly famous Russian authors a while ago that really liked the word, that for some reason some individuals believe are the only authors that ever talked on the stuff, because they're the only people they bring up. But being a theist of any stripe, being an atheist non-believer of any stripe, does not commit you necessarily to all of these other conclusions down the line, right? So yeah, I personally believe, and this isn't an argument or anything. This is just my experience. I believe that stepping away from the mindset that I did have a divine essence on my side, that there was an intelligent creator that sustained the universe and perpetuated it into the future. And so The moment I stepped away from that was the moment that I really began to experience hope and joy and peace. That was the time at which I was able to actually find myself sighing with relief and feeling comfortable, because every other moment up until then, there was a better answer to make the situation more correct, more fair, quicker, faster, slower, whatever the answer is. All of that was available, but for some reason not provided, and not provided with no explanation. This is why the problems of divine hiddenness and the problem of evil are such powerful arguments against God. There's a big reason why a lot of philosophers cite those issues, and it's because of that right there. You go pray 1,000 times, and not anything, nothing happens. True philosophical nothing happens. That's hard to come back from, you know? But yeah, I might have missed the last part of the question, but hopefully
I would like to answer the question in a much less philosophical way. As an atheist, I know you didn't ask me, but I have a habit of talking out of turn. Over here is a large group of atheists, and we are good friends. We see each other outside of here, and we just had a party like 2 weeks ago. We have a lot to look forward to. Like, we have joy, we have peace, we have love. I just got engaged. Like, we feel, yeah, I just said that to say it again. I have pets. I look forward to them. They're excited to see me when I come home. So there's the philosophical answer is, do they have something to look forward to? And then there is so much joy to be held on a daily basis as an atheist. There is so much love. In fact, one might argue that if the only reason you show love and kindness and joy is because you think you get a reward afterward, maybe it's disingenuous. But there's so much love and kindness and joy and friendship and potlucks and banana bread and music that we simply feel ends when you die. And we don't think you burn afterward. We don't think there's eternal blackness. We simply think you die.
So thank you for sharing that, guys. I think I see you from here through the people. I actually think that it's interesting because you were talking about this, and I had exactly the opposite experience. I would say, of course, this is my perspective. As an atheist, I thought life was ultimately nonsense. I'll explain to you why. So, you are here, you don't know why, you start being a critical thinker, you realize science has so many limitations. We're just describing things that are there. We don't know ontologically what they are. We don't care about, like, metaphysics is not something that is pertaining to the conversation much because of the actual worldview. You wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the mirror, you're getting older, there's disease, there's this movie that I like this thing that I drink, and I like being with this person, but those things end. And then you wake up the next day, you don't have the same. And you pursue these things that you know they're going to have an end. And as you pursue those things, you end up pursuing a lot of yourself, even though you think about, in community-wise, you end up thinking a lot about yourself. And then you see that ultimately all of this that you're doing in terms of worldview, this is my personal, not what you think or you, okay? It's just the way I saw it. It says ultimately everything is going to end in death. So the biggest question to go and answer, all the things that I've enjoyed in life, I have enjoyed, and they're so superficial to the point that they end. And I see how my body's just leaving me. I thought that, I'm talking about ultimate meaning. I thought it was pretty empty. So my experience was completely different and I understand you guys would say, well, Pedro, I don't see evidence for God. I understand that. It just, of course, is what happens when you do see evidence, you believe it, and you actually experience, not like, philosophical thing. No. Christianity, in my case, you live it out. Not just talk about it.
and then you see, oh wow, things change, and actually things that you think that are superficial, like they have no meaning, start being imbued with so much meaning. So I just think that it is interesting that you and I have such an extreme, interesting.
I was gonna say, I think the reason why you had that experience is because you weren't actually an atheist. You were just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
Checkmate.
Got him.
And scene. Thank you. We have one more.
Okay, I have a question to Elliot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just grew the courage to ask the question right now. But
good.
In the beginning of the conversation, you said that in order to ask a question beyond the system, you must first accept the system. And as someone that studies science here in this university, I accept multiple biochemical systems and cycles that go throughout our bodies and throughout nature. But how does going above the system, asking how did this system come to be, not prove to you the beauty and the joy and the existence of God? Because you said that it doesn't lead you to a creator, but instead it leads you to the opposite. How?
Yeah, so the system that I was referring to there is the same unanswerable questions that we must both sit in a space of uncomfortability and question marks. You have no answer for the fact that I exist or I don't. The only thing you can definitively prove is that you for sure exist. I could absolutely be just a figment of your imagination. Why are you imagining that I made chili before coming here? I don't know, bro. That's your weird fantasy. But I did. I made chili before I came here. And when I go back home, it will be there in the crock pot, right? So we have to accept that even though we don't have a sufficient answer for that, right? We have to move on in our system, right? So we have a couple of things like that. So logic is one of them, right? Just existence as a whole, just whether or not anything really is happening. The fact that other people exist, right? So when I was saying to question that system, we have to accept that, right? That's where the issue comes in for me when somebody says, but doesn't the existence of that system just prove the beauty of this other thing? And I would say, no, because you haven't explained anything. What you've done is you've provided me another question mark that at the best, does not have sufficient justification to accept, but more often than not, actually fails in the criteria that you lay out, right? So we've said, my gosh, we don't have an answer for the laws of logic. Well, God answers it. And then we go, oh, okay, well, what's God? What is it? And we go, well, it's a non-corporeal essence. I have no clue what that means.
Elliot.
And if anybody does, explain.
I turned off the mic, but I had to turn it on again.
Please,
and not because
fight
of
me.
anything. Because
Fight
that's
me.
a good question. Because okay, with this definition of God, what is God? We don't know. So we don't know what energy is.
I mean, we do. The ability
No,
to
we
do
don't.
work.
We don't
The
know
ability
what
to do work. Yeah, we do.
describe energy. We shape it to do experiments. We know,
Right,
but we
but what-
don't know. If I ask you, and I'm not putting you in the spot or anything like that.
Please.
But if you ask a
We'll end
scientist,
on a bang.
what is energy? What is energy?
Uh-huh.
What is energy?
So the problem, the issue with that question, right, is what that question is supposed to do. It is supposed to put you in a place like the question about solipsism puts you, where you find yourself struggling to stay afloat. The problem is, though, that what we have in our system is a handful of questions that do not currently have a sufficient answer. But by accepting these, we are able to answer seemingly more and more novel things that we have never seen before, and we get them right. We predict it time and time again, and we get more and more correct.
Because of
And
intelligence.
Hang on, but after all of that, after all of this progress, after the acceptance of the unanswerable 5 questions, you then say, but here's another question that we currently don't have an answer to. And you posit it as if that is something that violates these other things, and it doesn't. This question down here of us saying, hey, we're not super sure about what energy is, does not affect the system that we've been using this entire time to get to the point of asking ourselves, what the heck is energy?
But that happens with God too. Like we don't.
No.
We might not be able to define it, but
because
we
the
know
issue,
what it does.
The issue is that you put God first. The reason it's not a problem with the energy question is because it's all the way down the list. What you do is you accept these unanswerable things. We make all this progress. We find something that we currently don't have an answer to, and then we go all the way back to the start and say, I actually have a single answer for the 5 unanswerable questions. But when you apply the acceptance of those unanswerable questions to that one thing, it fails every time.
It doesn't.
Every time.
Because you're framing the answer. This student has says that he studies. That implies a brain that is functioning, consciousness implies intelligence, studies things that are mechanistical. Oh, this can be understood. We're talking about the same again. But you see that as he's doing that, he just sees patterns, information that can only be discerned with intelligence. What is the problem, Elliot? With him, because you're saying proof.
You have no
We're
way
not
of
proving.
determining whether or not a
But if
pattern
you see-
exists with the mind or
Elliot,
without.
I know, I understand. But if you see intelligence at every turn, you understand.
But
that
I don't. That's what I'm saying. You currently don't have the ability.
That's very Spanish.
You currently don't have the ability to distinguish between something that is ordered by a mind and isn't ordered by a mind. Because at the end of the day, the example that I would use to say not ordered by a mind is a flower that has a fractal pattern. And if you don't know what that means and why that's incredible, again, just like the sharks that glow, please look it up because it's fascinating.
Elliot, but it
hang on,
happens
but hang
to
on.
it happens
But it's
to
only
be
fascinating because we have the ability to distinguish between a human being making that pattern out of clay and it just occurring without anybody doing anything. The flower will grow whether I am there to observe or not.
But you
and
see,
that's the phenomenal
I
thing.
like all of this. I like your question a lot. But as you're saying this, you see that it happens to be the case, Elliot, Martin. It happens to be the case that only a mind can say and understand everything that we're talking about.
Right.
So
but
by implication, saying that a mind has put everything together, there's behind something that is actually intelligence that can only be understood by the mind is critical thinking at its finest. We're not proving the existence of God. You cannot do that with science. Proof. That's mathematics. William, he would agree with me. You can prove only.
William
Do
into
you
this.
think we have proven the existence of God, or do you think we haven't?
You can
Like on
prove things with
Facebook,
mathematics.
comment below,
The
subscribe.
The rest is just probability. That's the way it works.
Yeah,
but
join us on Patreon.
you see that the student is just seeing. That's what he's saying. If you see a pattern, and the only thing, as far as we know right now, is a mind, you understand that it's not a huge jump. Like if you ask evidence that is empirical, we're not going to do that because science doesn't do either. It doesn't give you, these are the reasons why God exists. We're talking about different type of conversation. But by implication, it happens to be a mind, the only thing that can understand this pattern. So by implication, as you can see, you can hypothesize so much and so well that there's a mind. And
I'm so sorry, I forgot.
I think
Which of you is the Christian and the atheist? I'm not sure.
I think we might agree on this, Pedro. Apparently, we're just gonna have to talk more about this in the future.
Yes,
we have some
yes.
disagreements to have.
Join us in January of 2024, the last Thursday of the month. Pedro, Elliot, the Conversation Coalition, and everybody here who helped us put this together. This has been really, really cool. Thank you so much to the team who helped put this together, to John. Yes.
All I would add is thank you for coming to our university, and I'm so glad that this conversation could happen here. And I'm thankful to our provost and president for approving this conversation because not not that long ago this conversation probably wouldn't have happened on this campus. And so I think that that's progress, and I think it's helpful for our students, if they are true believers, to have that tested and for them to figure out what they really believe. So I appreciate you guys, and I've known Pedro for a while now. So we have had Ask a Wonder events and now Conversation Coalition, and I hope that can continue. So thank you guys. One last thing that you've probably seen on the screen, and I think one thing that believers and non-believers can agree on is that we should care about the creation and God's planet. And right, the planet, the planet. Don't complicate it, okay? We're gonna get in a conversation about nothing again, and then you can't even. Sorry, John. Okay. Sorry about that, John. Right. In April, we're having a theologian who thinks that as Christians we have done a disservice when we don't care for the planet, and has written a book that kind of calls out the Christian community about that particular topic. And so she'll be here April the 11th, which is also on a Thursday, so hopefully we're not in competition with that. But you're all invited to come out for that. And it'll be here on campus, probably around the corner in Ward Auditorium, which is a little bit larger space. But if you're interested, scan the QR code, maybe get that on your calendar, and we'd love to have you.